On October 20th, 1981, Karen Wrigglesworth gave birth to a baby boy, Brian Robert, son of Jeffrey. Several years later, Karen and Jeffrey had another child, this time a girl, Elizabeth. Within no time, they realized Elizabeth to be a far superior human being to Brian, so they sent Brian into the fields to fend for his own, to become a man. A cow pasture is no place for a child, and Brian matured quickly. Amongst the chaos, violence, corruption, and cow dung, he mixed with all the wrong crowds. Speed freaks, greasers, savages, psychedelic rock groups, prepubescent youth with a penchant for show tunes and coating their faces with cheap stage makeup to look like Puerto Ricans. Squirrels. The pasture is lonely, and Brian was lured in by the sultry siren call and warm embrace of fallen women, women of questionable moral standing, women of the night, harlots, Jezebels, girls from Clearfield, dogs, cows, horses, and a boy who looked like a girl but I can assure you is a boy. This boy Levi, however, actually turned out to be a pretty good friend, and a good footballer too. Football saved Brian's life. It was on the sacred pitch of the beautiful game that Brian invented the cow header and the farm foot, which was far more successful and also alliterated. Ironically, however, it was for the cow header that Brian would ultimately be remembered. In the 1999 championship game between Curwinslow and Brockway, with rumors flying of a high-profile transfer for the farm foot to the English side Chelsea, Italian exchange student Marco Materazzi grabbed Brian's jersey. Brian sneered and told Materazzi that if he wanted his jersey, he would give it to him after the game. Then Materazzi insulted Karen and Elizabeth.
Zapaiollo, tua madre e tua sorella l'hanno data via a tutto il paese.
Brian knew Italian from a field trip with Mr. Rolls, and he did the only thing he knew to do. Disgraced, Brian returned home. He asked his parents what to do. You need a woman in your life. Why don't you go to college and look for one? You can major in farming. You already know what you're doing, so that way you can skip class and spend more time with the ladies. In college, Brian met 3 wise men who taught him many things. Yet, despite his new lure and more fish and some of the same fish in a bigger sea, for some reason, none of them took the bait. As the wise men parted, Brian tried to give back to them what they had given him. Jason was an engineer seeking to develop a polymer that could conduct electricity. Brian told him, "Why don't you just run a wire through the plastic?" Jason became a rich man. Mike was in advertising for a car insurance company. Brian told him, "You know what would make people want car insurance? A talking lizard, like a gecko." Mike, too, became a rich man, although the lizard eventually drove him to the loony bin. Adam was in finance. Brian didn't know what that meant, and it sounded pretty boring, so he just told him to give it 110%, and that way he'd always be a winner. Forcing a smile, Brian returned home, where he ran into his old friend Levi. "You don't look so well." "Yeah, these flags and medals aren't really helping with the women. So what do we do now?" "Well, I hear there's this place called grad school where people like us can go back and try to date undergrad girls all over again, but with more insight this time." "Awesome. Perfect." When Brian saw her, he knew she was the one. He felt something change deep inside him. He let her take the wheel. He drowned her ex-boyfriends. He asked her to marry him. And when she said yes, he asked his friend Levi if he had any more advice for him. Levi said, "You're a wise man now, Brian, so why don't you give something back to the world, as a teacher?" Brian taught all the subjects he knew best: chemistry, biology, girls volleyball. And then Levi said one more thing. "Before you and Sarah have any kids, why don't you practice by getting a dog?" And so they did.